Yeah.
This is Geek Therapy Radio.
What are we waiting for?
And now your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio this week, and boy, I really gotta tell you, Nike is pissing me off. Nike has really offended me to the point where I don't even know how much I can really say about it because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to create too much of a heated argument here that gets me saying something stupid. This whole entire ordeal just rubs me the wrong way, pisses me off, and makes me not want to buy any Nike product. It really pisses me off that they haven't released the Hyper Adapt 1.0. I'm so pissed I can't buy self-lacing shoes. What's up with that, Nike? How can you piss us off so much that you tease us with these self-lacing shoes and then you don't make them available to the general public? The audacity of Nike. Can you believe them? This is really pissing people off. No, but seriously, Nike they released in limited numbers because basically it's a concept more than an actual widespread release of a product. The Hyper Adapts, and a lot of you might have even forgotten what those are. I know there's a lot of sneaker lovers out there who know exactly what they are. But remember in Back to the Future 2, where we saw the Nike Air Mags. They were self-lacing shoes. Marty slipped his feet into there, and they yanked down on his foot, and they were self-lacing shoes, and it was the coolest thing. One of the coolest things, beside the hoverboard and the DeLorean. I think that's probably the third coolest thing about Back to the Future 2. And they did actually release working Air Mags, and Michael J. Fox actually put them on, which is really cool in itself. But I really want the Hyper Adapts to come to a more widespread market. I want to go to Foot Locker and just buy Hyper Adapts. That'd be awesome. And that's a big thing coming from me because for the past 20 years at least, the only shoes I've ever worn have been Vans. Period. End of story. Vans and rarely dress shoes. Do you remember back in the day when you were in elementary school and every once in a while your parents would take you to get new shoes and you couldn't wait to get to school the next day because you'd feel like the coolest kid on the playground, and you also believed all of the hype and advertising of the shoe, that it would make you faster or jump higher. So the next day on the playground you tried to show everybody you could run faster than them, only to realize that you cannot run that fast and that little flames don't shoot off the back of your feet. But shoes were a much bigger deal to me back then. I remember getting the light up shoes, I want adult shoes that light up. Like, straight up, no joke, I want adult shoes, and I would wear them if they lit up. I would wear dress shoes that lit up. I promise you, I would go to a funeral wearing light up RGB shoes. I'm sure they exist. They probably do exist. How come I haven't bought some light up shoes yet? Do you remember pumps? I think Reebok was the first one to release the pumps. And did they ever release like pump? If you were to walk into your school the next day buying shoes and your shoes somehow had the pumps on them and light up, that was it. You were king or queen of the castle. There's nobody could touch you. You were instantly like the coolest kid on earth for until you graduated high school. Remember Billy showed up in 2nd grade with pumps and light-up shoes? That kid was the coolest kid that ever lived. Probably still the coolest person that ever lived. So, yeah, I wish Nike released... Let me buy some Hyper Adapts. Self-lacing shoes is the coolest thing in the world, and Nike, the fact that you're holding out on us really pisses me off. Me and a lot of people. I think it pisses us off so much that some people are even lighting their shoes on fire, which I know you don't care about because they already bought the shoes. But still, you've got people really riled up over this. Unless I'm missing something. I don't know. I just remember shoes back in the day being a lot cooler to me than they are now, and I know a lot of people geek out about sneakers, geek out about shoes. I have a couple of friends who are massively into shoes. Not shoes, sneakers. I should rephrase that, sneakers. I think back a few years ago, I actually bought some Chuck Taylors, because for some reason I was thinking punk rock and Kurt Cobain and everything, and I wanted some Chucks. I said, I don't recall ever wearing Chucks. You know what I realized? Chuck Taylors are super uncomfortable. It's just canvas and rubber. They are horrible. It is a big time fashion statement if you're walking around rocking Chucks. And the thing that blew my mind even more is I had the high top Chucks. And Chuck Taylors used to be basketball shoes. That's what the first basketball players wore, were those canvas and rubber Chuck Taylors. I couldn't imagine more hell on your ankle than running around playing an entire basketball game in Chuck Taylors. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. I'm Johnny Hemberger, your mental curator. Stick with me. We're going to talk about some real cool stuff here. It is going to be an awesome show. Stick around. Who among us doesn't love great beer, amazing food, and arcade games? That's why I'm stoked beyond geek belief to tell you about Kung Fu Saloon, located at 5317 Washington Avenue, right here in Houston. Kung Fu Saloon on Washington Avenue has the Geek Trinity covered, and then some. Of course they have the most excellent beer on tap, the nomiest food off the grill, and the vintage arcade games we love. But you can also get your Tay-Tay on with karaoke, your super fan on with televised sports, and your rug cut to the best music and DJs on Washington Avenue. In addition to arcade games, get your competitive fix with Giant Jenga, Giant Connect 4, 3 skee-ball lanes, shuffleboard, and foosball. Get your drink, food, game, karaoke, and dance on. Or step to Street Fighter 2 with me and get your geek fanny served. Hadouken! Kung Fu Saloon, 5317 Washington Avenue. Visit www.kungfusaloonhouston.com for more details and dress code info. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am Johnny Hemberger, your mental curator. Coming up in the next segment, I talk to Dr. Tim Cooper. He's a biologist, to say the least, and we talk about what would actually go into and what are some of the challenges of resurrecting extinct animals, specifically dinosaurs. So that's a very interesting discussion with an actual doctor about it, an actual biologist. So that's going to be really neat. That's coming up in the next segment. Me and Dr. Tim Cooper talking about resurrecting extinct animals. But welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. In this segment, I want to talk about electric cars and transportation and the future. And this discussion, this segment is going to go, a few different ways. But I guess I will just start it off by saying one of the biggest challenges to electric cars and the rollout of electric cars in a more widespread fashion isn't just the technological difficulties, the range anxiety, the batteries and all the electronic components and all the engineering that goes involved. That's almost the easy part. What I'm getting at is the hard part still seems to be educating the general public. I think a lot of people really like the idea of electric cars. They really like the idea of not having to pay for any more gasoline. You're going to pay for the energy either way, but not paying for the gasoline. A lot of us are concerned with a vehicle's effect on the environment. So there's a whole lot of pros in people's minds towards going electric. But one of the biggest things, the biggest hurdle still, like I said, besides the technological challenges, which are easy compared to, we still need to educate the general public about electric cars, period. You know, I was reading that, who was the columnist? It was an expert in the field, and he said, to put it simply, he still receives lots of questions from quite a few people about something as simple as, quote unquote, what do I do when my car battery dies? How do I fill it back up? And you think I'm being facetious here. You think I'm overstating it, but I'm not. That's a legit question that a lot of people in the general public have. How do I fill my electric car back up once the battery depletes? And it's not because those people are stupid. It's just not. I guess they're just not thinking it through. You fill it up the same way you charge your cell phone. You just plug it in. You drive. You put it. You don't go to a gas station. You go into your park to your garage or your driveway, and you just plug a cord into it. Just like you're plugging in a toaster or something. Or more accurately, again, it's just plugging in a phone. Just picture it as a big 3,000 pound, 4,000 pound, 5,000 pound phone. That's what you do when you run out of quote-unquote fuel in your electric car. Just plug it in. But you would be surprised how many people haven't thought that far, or it didn't dawn on them. And I don't blame those people that they're ignorant about it. They've gone their entire life getting used to and utilizing gasoline-powered vehicles. It's like muscle memory. When you see your needle go low, you're running low on fuel, you plug the pump into it, the nozzle into your car, and you squirt gas in there. But you would be surprised how many people are ignorant about what gasoline is and where gasoline comes from. All they know is they plug a nozzle thing into the car and it makes funny smells, and now their car, the needle goes up. That's as far as they have to think about it. That's part of the beauty of why gasoline vehicles work so well. There's no education involved in it. It's just what people know. It's what they're raised on. It's what they're used to. But people aren't used to electric cars. And it's strange to them. It sounds futuristic, or like it's something that only millennials will know how to do, or only young people will know how to do. But it's really as simple as just plugging something in. Plugging in your cell phone. Plugging in, I was about to say your VCR. Plugging in your TV, plugging in whatever, recharging whatever. It's just now you recharge your car. That's it. But the point remains. There's a lack of education, awareness about electric cars, that they're not these strange things that require so much extra attention and difficulty and learning curve. You drive it like you drive your gasoline car. It's just you plug in it at home overnight, and then it's ready full tank when you leave again. There's still some range anxiety, but range anxiety is getting better. The Chevy Bolt, for instance, this is not an ad for Chevy, but the Chevy Bolt has come to market before the Tesla Model 3 at the price point that the Model 3 was supposed to come out at. So you can buy a Chevy Bolt for well under $40,000, especially with the tax credit, and you have up to and over, a lot of owners are stating, over 238 miles per charge, per full charge. So 238, that means I can go to Austin, plug it in Austin, wherever I'm at, and I come out the next day, it's full again, and I drive back home to Houston. So the range anxiety is being eliminated. Tesla better watch out, because Chevy has beat Tesla to the market with an affordable electric car. And I think the Bolt also, and again, this is not an ad for Chevy, the Bolt also just looks like a normal car. When the Prius came out, it looked out of this world, and it still looks ridiculous. It looks better, but it still looks ridiculous. The Chevy Bolt, unless someone pointed it out to you that it was an electric car, you might not take a second glance at it. It just looks like a hatchback. The Volkswagen e-Golf, which doesn't have as much range currently as the Bolt, and by the way, the e-Golf is going away because in 2020 Volkswagen is releasing a whole new line of pure electric vehicles, which I'm waiting for. That's my next car is probably going to be an electric vehicle. I wouldn't be surprised if my next car is a fully 100% electric vehicle, no gas at all. And I'm kind of waiting on Volkswagen to release them in 2020. They look cool. Look them up. So that brings me to this next point, is that, and it kind of goes more towards autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, the Tesla and other models, I guess. Autonomous electric vehicles. People are very ignorant, borderline stupid when it comes to what autonomous vehicles are, and Tesla doesn't do themselves any favors. I've said this before. Tesla doesn't do themselves any favors. Elon Musk doesn't do himself any favors by calling the assisted driving mode autopilot. Because people who are ignorant, I won't just say stupid, who are just at least ignorant, put it in autopilot mode, and they're looking at their phones and things, and something comes out front that quote-unquote autopilot doesn't catch in time, and they hit something and crash. A woman in Utah recently sued Tesla because her Model S crashed and she broke her foot. As it turns out, she put it into this quote-unquote autopilot mode, was looking down on her phone and didn't see whatever pulled out in front of her, and the car didn't stop in time, and she crashed into it. And the cops wrote her up and fined her for failure to safely operate a vehicle. Failure to stop in time, failure to whatever, and now she's suing Tesla. Tesla, it's your fault my car didn't stop in time. I was in your autopilot mode. No, lady. That's not what it means. It's just driver assist. It doesn't mean stop paying attention, stop operating the vehicle. And when you turn on the driver assist mode, when you turn on autopilot mode, it warns you from heaven to hell and earth in between to keep your focus on the road, keep your hands near the wheel, keep your feet near the pedals, because it's just driver assist. Don't be an idiot and stop paying attention to the road. It is just driver assist. So that all goes towards my whole argument this segment. There needs to be, we've reached the point where we've pretty much got producing electric cars down. There's still room for improvement, but the big, hardest issue to overcome here is educating the public on what electric cars are and what autonomous vehicles are, or semi-autonomous vehicles are. Education is still very necessary in this quest towards fully electric cars. I'm Johnny Hemberger. Stick around. Tim Cooper coming up. We're going to talk about resurrecting extinct animals. It's going to be fun. More Geek Therapy Radio in just a moment. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and I am very excited. I've had a few people on the show, and today I'm actually kind of really geeking out. You know, it's like I'm like a kid in a candy shop because I'm actually getting to talk to a real biologist on something that I find fascinating, and I'm sure he finds fascinating too. I will introduce him real quick as Tim, but I will let Tim introduce himself fully because I don't want to butcher his title or his name. And we're connected all the way from New Zealand here, so this is by far the longest phone call I think we've had on the show so far. So Tim, welcome in, and tell everyone who you are.
Great, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, my name's Tim Cooper. I'm a professor of molecular biosciences at Massey University in Auckland, New Zealand.
That's wonderful. See, I got your name from the directory at U of H. So can you tell what were you doing over at U of H? And when did you leave?
Yeah, I was there for 10 years. I've had 10 years in Texas, and I left there January this year.
Wow. Okay. So as I kind of told you before, this is kind of a mental exercise, if nothing else. I'm sure. Well, what sparked it off is I read in the news this story. They found I don't know if you've seen it too. I'm sure you have. They unearthed a foal, a horse there in Siberia that they date between 40 and 1,000 years old. Have you read anything about that?
A horse? No, I haven't read a horse. I've seen plenty of mammoths being unearthed there. But
Yes, yeah, and that's what got my mind rolling, because usually it's mammoths, and anytime they unearth one of these extinct creatures, the conversation always comes up about cloning. Can we clone this extinct species of horse? Can we clone the woolly mammoth and such? I don't know about you, but back when Jurassic Park came out, I think that's what, I don't mean to sound too daft here, but back when Jurassic Park came out, I think that sparked a lot of kind of young minds thinking about cloning, not necessarily believing that, at least right now we could resurrect an extinct species. But that's why I kind of want to talk to you, because I want to talk about what potential roadblocks and the complications that could arise from trying to do just that. Not specifically a dinosaur, but I guess I'll just ask you, have you seen Jurassic Park? Did you enjoy that movie at all?
Yeah, I have way back then. And it's true that I remember the scenes looking at the cloning that probably played some influence in the direction that my research, early research career took.
Yes. See, what's interesting is not to get too far off topic, but I was talking to somebody recently who they were telling me, who was it? I think they emailed the show or something, that they are an aeronautical engineer now. They went into the Air Force here in the States, and they got set down a path of airplanes and air. I can't even talk. It's hard to say, aeronautical engineering. But what sparked them down this path wasn't necessarily some really amazing TED Talk that they saw. What initially sparked them down the path was playing a video game where they were playing as fighter pilots, and that's what sparked them to get into that field. So it doesn't seem far-fetched. I wouldn't say that Jurassic Park probably is the only thing that got you set down that path, but it was a good encourager. Would you disagree?
Yeah, no, something like that. I started off as a physics major, actually, and I'm not quite sure how it happened, but somehow I ended up in molecular biology, and it wasn't everything. But making biology sound fun, making cloning sound fun, it didn't hurt, maybe. Yeah.
So did you get a degree in physics and then move on from there to graduate school and such?
No, I started off as a physics major, and then I think I went to a biochemistry major, and ended up with a molecular biology major. I'm lucky, and I've more or less stuck with that throughout.
I don't know if jealous is the right word. I envy your mind and your dedication to devote to such a path. But let's get on to the topic at hand here. The way people get duped by the movies, sometimes they see something on screen. For instance, you remember the scene in the original Jurassic Park where the Triceratops is sick and the botanist is there and she's checking on the Triceratops? People actually wrote into the studio. They actually wrote to Steven Spielberg and all of them. They were animal activists saying, "How dare you injure a Triceratops for the sake of making a movie?" So it's not so far fetched that people might see this movie and think, "Oh, cloning dinosaurs and bringing dinosaurs back to life, that must be right around the corner. They must be actually working on it. That must seem feasible to actually do." And you and I both know that it's not. What do you think? Because they mentioned in Jurassic Park, and I that's kind of the most basic way to allude to things for my audience of who is probably mostly lay people on this subject. They talked in Jurassic Park about the gaps in the DNA sequence and how they patched it in with asexual frogs or frogs that can change their sex. The point is that there was gaps in the gene sequence, and they just took other animals and kind of filled in the gaps. Is it within your realm to tell us yes or no? Is that possible? And if not, why not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think actually they were probably closer to being realistic than people have got for a while after that. Mm-hmm. I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think most people, when they think about resurrecting some extinct species, think about taking the entire genome of that extinct species, the DNA sequence, the recipe book for what makes it what it is, mm-hmm. and somehow transferring it into a cell of a living species, and then getting this kind of hybrid that then over time begins to look more like the extinct species. So this is the process of cloning that famously Dolly the sheep was produced using. So that's now 20-something years ago. Yeah. The problem with that approach is that you really need a very good copy of the extinct species genome because it needs to be complete. It needs to work as is. Yeah. And that's not possible if something has been dead for more than not very many years. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's possible for frozen preserved mammoths where some of the cells are still intact. But for dinosaurs, when we're going back millions of years, their DNA is degraded and you can't get a complete copy. So you can't revive it as is. So what may be possible is an approach where you make a hybrid. You take some existing species that's related to an extinct species, and you start moving parts from the extinct species into that existing species, hoping to get something that looks more like the extinct species. So I think this is possible if the two species are relatively closely related. And so I don't know what the hard limits on that might be. Yeah. But I really doubt there's anything close enough to a dinosaur now, so that cloning in a few pieces of dinosaur DNA into a frog or something is going to result in a hybrid that looks like a dinosaur.
I'm going to go ahead and leave the conversation there for now until we get back into it in the next segment. I'm doing this as an editing for time thing. It was kind of a long interview, so I'm saving it for the next segment. It gets even more interesting, if you can believe it, so stick around to the next interview. In the meantime, make sure you are all subscribed to the Geek Therapy Radio stuff, to Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio on Instagram, Geek Therapy Radio on Twitter. Maybe you're watching this on YouTube, but if you're just listening to the radio right now, you can subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube, and you can see what I'm doing here on the radio. As of this particular segment that you're looking at right now or listening to right now, I'm in my apartment, so I'm not at the radio station here, but my interview with Tim Cooper is at the radio station. So if you're curious to see what's going on Geek Therapy Radio, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do other videos there. It's not just radio show stuff on there. I have a review of the NVIDIA Shield tablet that I did a few years ago, how the NVIDIA Shield tablet holds up in 2018 when it came out in 2014. Is it still viable? So I did also a review and an in-depth tour of my 1983 DeLorean, so make sure you are subscribed to Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube and you can see all that good stuff. So I'm coming right back here after this commercial break. If you're listening to the podcast, there's no commercials here. We're just going to get back into it. But after the commercial break, if you're listening to this on the radio, more with Dr. Tim Cooper on the possibilities of resurrecting extinct animals. It's going to be great. Stick around. I'm Johnny Hamburger. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up in just a second. If you're just joining us, Dr. Tim Cooper is talking to us about resurrecting extinct species and the potential complications and the actual complications that would be involved there. And let's just say we're going to resurrect a T-Rex. Let's just be really specific here. Is there anything remotely close today? And I know in Jurassic Park they kept talking about birds and everything. Is there anything remotely close today that if you were in charge of putting this T-Rex together, this hybrid together, is there something alive today that might make as good a candidate as any for a surrogate to take the egg and the whatever genetic material and incubate this thing, take the fetus and bring it to term? Is there anything alive today that could possibly, even just wildly speculatively, birth a dinosaur hybrid?
Well, I mean, it is speculation, but I would really strongly suspect no. T-Rex went extinct about, 60 million years ago. Mm-hmm. So nothing alive today is going to be genetically close enough to be a good match. Mm-hmm. Certainly, and not only would it have to be a good match, it would have to be genetically, so that we could mix and match DNA between extinct and living and get something viable. But something living today would have to be a good enough match, so also it could be physiologically a surrogate.
Yeah.
So presumably that means being big enough to carry a T-Rex, a developing T-Rex, to some kind of viable state where it can be fend for itself. So.
Exactly.
And I don't know, but I guess maybe that requires quite a big space and a big host organism that maybe the closest relatives today, little lizards, just aren't going to cut it.
Whether we are able to produce a living dinosaur either with a surrogate host or in the lab, the question remains, and I'm not even going to get into the ethics of it all, but evolutionarily speaking, the Earth has changed so much from the time that the T-Rex in this case has gone extinct that just, let's say you were able to bring a perfect living T-Rex into this world, what challenges do you think it would face in surviving in this world? Not just giving it food, but is there any sort of environmental factors or ecological or anything like that might prove that might not be able to sustain a T-Rex? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's definitely another issue. If we manage to do this, then what? I doubt that just the environment, the kind of external non-living environment has changed enough to be an issue. Mm-hmm. But certainly the ecology, the plants that are around now, the animals that are around now, have changed so wildly from what was present back in the days of the dinosaurs that what they would do if they were released in the wild, I think, one, it wouldn't be good to the extent they did something, and two, I think it's quite likely it wouldn't be sustainable either for the T-Rex or for whatever it was that they were eating.
Somebody was talking to me about this the other day, in that they didn't think they were not a scientist. This was just some random person that they didn't think a dinosaur could exist. Let's say, I don't think he was remembering that there were small dinosaurs as well, but he's talking about like Brachiosaurus or some huge dinosaur like that it wouldn't be able to get enough oxygen today. Like it was more oxygen rich perhaps back then. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I don't think so. I mean, it's not my field, but I don't think oxygen levels have changed dramatically in this kind of time scale. So
I think that's, and again, this is just a mental exercise. I think that's what he was getting at, is maybe he heard somewhere that the atmosphere was super rich in oxygen back then, and the lungs are so big, and you need all the more oxygen to go into the blood to sustain the animal, that if you were able to bring a massive animal like a T-Rex back to life. But here, this is what I postulated. This is what I countered with. I was blue whale. Isn't the blue whale the big? I think the blue whale is the biggest organism that has ever existed on Earth. Definitely the biggest mammal, but I think just accounting for every animal ever, dinosaur or anything, that the blue whale is the biggest animal to ever exist, and it breathes fine. When it breathes, it draws in enough oxygen. So why not, if we were able to reproduce a Brachiosaurus would it not be able to breathe?
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the blue whale is the biggest organism ever, at least multicellular organism. I think that's true. I mean, I guess I would say if oxygen levels back then were different, then the Brachiosaurus wouldn't have been given a chance to adapt to any change, whereas the blue whale has presumably been able to adapt as levels change. Although I really don't think the extant environment is different enough that would be the problem. We know temperatures increase, we know carbon dioxides come up. Yeah. But I think these things are probably pretty minor for the average dinosaur.
Yeah, I think we both agree there. Coming up to the end here, usually when I'm talking to guests and such, I ask them, what they want to plug or anything like that. But Tim, what are you working on currently? What's got you excited? Since this is Geek Therapy Radio, what are you quote unquote geeking out about right now?
The kind of research we do, or at least what I'm interested in getting more into, is effects of antibiotic resistance on bacteria, and especially what happens to bacteria once they become resistant. Do they learn to adapt to that resistance, or do they suffer in the absence of that drug now? And we've made this kind of hobbled bacteria that will revert to being susceptible when we withdraw the drug. Which sounds very different from cloning in dinosaurs, but actually what it involves is how different mutations interact with one another and affect one another and do or don't add up in some predictable way, which I think is one of the problems with trying to make a hybrid between a dinosaur and a living species is we don't know how those two different sets of DNA are going to add up together. Whether we take half of something that's viable and half of another thing that's viable and put them together, do we get something viable, or do we get something that there's some conflict, some antagonism, and things don't work out? Yeah. So at lots of different levels, dinosaurs and birds to bacteria and antibiotic resistance. I think that this theme of genetic interactions is important.
Yes.
So that's what I'm geeking out about.
Yeah, and because there's massive, again, understatement to say that there's massive parallels there. Who's not to say that the research you're doing isn't pivotal in this quest towards, I don't know if we call it a quest, but cloning anything, not just cloning dinosaurs or cloning woolly mammoths, but people or different, more complex types of species. What you're doing, to me and to a lot of people listening, definitely plays a role in that. You can't just toss different DNA together and different, the genetic makeup of different animals together and expect it just to work. So the research you're doing is paving the way for learning more about that process. Yeah,
I hope so. I mean, I hope it's at least part of a conversation that we need to understand if there are any general rules about how different sources of DNA go together, how they work together.
Dr. Tim Cooper, thank you so much for coming on Geek Therapy Radio. It was an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the success in the world, in the universe, and hopefully I'll get to have you back on again one day.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Johnny.
That's going to do it for Geek Therapy Radio this week. Again, my eternal thanks to Dr. Tim Cooper for coming on here and having that fascinating discussion on resurrecting extinct animals. In the meantime, until next week, subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all that good stuff, and be good to each other, starting by being good to yourself. It's much easier to be good to each other when we start by being good to ourselves. So indulge a new hobby, find a new hobby, rekindle an old hobby, and just be good to yourself. Until next week, I'm Johnny Hemberger, your mental curator. See you then.